to Sri Lanka, service chiefs, our defense chiefs, ladies and gentlemen. The first event we witnessed today was a very beautiful dance, and I thought that reflected the spirit of Sir John, because Sir John was a man who had zest for life, and he was a man of tremendous brilliance. And I thought that the Vice-Chancellor has maintained that spirit of Sir John. 18 years ago, when I left the shores of Sri Lanka for my higher education, I had this vast collection of books and papers that I had collected, and I was looking for a place to gift these books. So I contacted, then it was the Kotalawalapura Defense Academy. I contacted the Commandant, and I gave that collection. So I am very pleased that the KDA has today emerged as KDU, and today it is one of the best established defense universities in Asia. So I want to pay a tribute to our Vice-Chancellor and for the previous Vice-Chancellors and the previous Commandants and the staff that has served at these great institutions. Let me focus on three aspects as a part of my presentation. First, Sri Lanka achieved great moral and strategic triumph when it dismantled the LTT in May of 2009. Sri Lanka is the first country in the 21st century to defeat a terrorist organization and an insurgent movement. The Americans in Iraq, the Americans in Afghanistan, despite so much of resources and so many human fatalities and casualties, have not been able to bring law and order to those two countries. In fact, after the US withdrew from Iraq, the insurgency persists. And in Afghanistan, the US is now planning to withdraw, but insurgency still rages. So in the global canvas of threat groups, the LTT ranked very high. In fact, many said that the Lebanese Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, and the Tamil Tigers belong to that class of terrorist groups that were very resilient and very difficult to dismantle. So in many ways, the achievement that Sri Lanka made when it defeated the LTT is a very unique example. And my today's presentation, I'm going to focus on how the LTT itself transformed after its military defeat in Sri Lanka. LTT was a global terrorist organization. Although the LTT's structured military organizations were based in Sri Lanka, it maintained a very significant terrorist support network overseas. In fact, we had identified two centers of gravity with regard to the LTT. One was the leadership. Until Prabhakaran and until his key leaders, Pottu Amman, Thipan, and many others were eliminated, the threat posed by the LTT could not have been ended. And the security forces were very successful in containing the threat through security measures. Secretary of Defense played a very important role in coordinating the Army, Navy, Air Force, the Civil Defense Force, the police, and the intelligence services. And that led to, in many ways, the containing of the threat, then isolation of the threat in the Vani region, and then the threat shifted to the Mullaitivu area. And because the LTT could not survive, it infiltrated the existing no-fire zone the government had created for the civilians. And of course, finally the military breached the LTT defenses that were created and rescued that civilian population. I myself traveled several times to that area. And I want to share with you that although the LTT in Sri Lanka was dismantled, and there were a number of efforts on the part of the Sri Lankan government to stabilize the north and the east immediately after war, and many commendable initiatives, one being the resettlement of IDPs after they were screened. Second is the rehabilitation of 11,500 LTT leaders, members, helpers. Government also looked at how to develop a strategy towards redeveloping the Northeast. And having visited Sri Lanka every month in the last 2 years, and many of those travels I visited either the North or the East, I want to share with you that there are very few countries in the world where in such a short period of 2 years, so much of work in the areas of rehabilitation, resettlement, and reintegration had been done. I accompanied a counterterrorism specialist from the United States 2 months ago to the Vani region, and he made a very interesting remark. He said that what Sri Lanka has achieved in 2 years, Yugoslavia took 10 years, former Yugoslavia took 10 years to achieve in stabilizing the former Yugoslavia. But what is remarkable is that the Sri Lankan military was able to prevent secession of the country, and after that they were able to invest very significantly in nation building. So the armed forces that fought a war, that invested in kinetic operations, very quickly adapted, very quickly morphed or transformed into a force that was able to rehabilitate detainees, look after the IDPs that were displaced, 280,000, of which only about 9,000 still remain, and that also in open welfare centers where they can go in and out. But the armed forces also play a very significant role in the socio-economic development of the Northeast. So there are three principal categories where the armed forces had invested other than war fighting. One is in humanitarian assistance, second is in socio-economic development, and third is in political engagement. And today we are seeing that transformation of the military, the rapid transformation, has enabled very significant stability in the Northeast. And this, to maintain this level of commitment, it is imperative and essential for institutions like the KDU constantly to invest in the armed forces, to think of the changes on the ground and prepare them for the new challenges.